Okay, with that, I'm going to now turn it over to Cindy Lou Garcia and Kevin Ho, who will be presenting Managing CAEP Data in ASAP.
All right, thank you, Marjorie. That was great. Thank you all for attending. I see a lot of you are veteran users, so I will be covering a lot of basics, but if any of you are new to bringing your data from ASAP over to TE, it'll be kind of a quick review, or a quick overview, I should say. I just wanted to introduce myself. For those of you, I know most of you, I'm Cindy Lou Garcia. I work with client success with ASAP. And I'd like to introduce my colleague.
Hi, this is Kevin Ho. I work in the implementation manager section, and I'm going to be monitoring the chat window. So if you guys want to post any comments or questions there, that would be great. And then I'm also going to drop the link or a file download for you to be able to download this presentation in the chat window. So you should see that in a second. Thank you.
All right. And I'm going to stop my video so it doesn't take up so much bandwidth, and get started here. There was a handout in the chat. There was another one on the CAEP website, possibly. They are a little bit different. I just want you to know I made a few minor changes before I uploaded the official slide deck. So the newer version is in the chat. So that should be available. Kevin posted that file for you. So we're going to start with our agenda. I'm basically going to be providing you kind of an overview of the data files, obviously that are brought over from ASAP to TE. I'll go over the reports in ASAP that we recommend to review your data. And then I'll briefly run through the export options and settings. So that's kind of the preparation part of it. I'm going to try to spend a little bit more time with the second half of the agenda to share best practices along with a few handy ASAP reports that are really helpful to cross-check your CAEP data with ASAP. So we're going to look at just a quick view of the CAEP data integrity report and then the CAEP summary reports. The last section of the slide deck under CASAS test scores in ASAP, it's merely a set of instructions for how to import your CASAS test scores. I'm not going to go step by step into that because we reference several how-to articles on that, but it shows you after the scores are imported where to go in ASAP to view the data. And then finally, there's just some resources at the end. And again, I'll share a few screenshots of the class detail pages and such. I'm not planning to go into the platform, just in essence of time, because I have a lot of slides to go through. But if there's time at the end, I would be more than happy to open ASAP and kind of navigate through that. All right. So the first set of slides here are the data files. So there are the 8 basic files. The last one, the student class status, is optional. I'm going to start with the first 2. So you have your personnel and your classes. So the personnel are basically just the teacher, an email. We're hoping for possibly second semester to be able to include number of years and also credentials. So that's something that we're working on because I know a lot of you are managing that in TE right now because we don't have a way to collect it in ASAP. So that's something that will be up and coming. For the classes, I'm just going to go over briefly some screenshots of where you can enter your special programs, how the instructional program is brought over, and a couple other new releases that will be coming out. So in the class detail page, so here's a screenshot of a beginning ESL class. So with that, you're going to go to the details area at the top. So at the top here, it says roster, schedule, notes, and details. So when you open up the class detail page, you immediately see the roster. To get to the CASAS settings, you have to hit details and then CASAS. So the first item listed is your instructional setting. So that includes classroom, classroom plus distance learning, and so on. Another update for second semester is we're going to include HighFlex. So that'll be made available under the instructional setting. So just kind of keep that in mind if you want to update that. Second semester, we'll have the HighFlex available under class instructional setting. And then your class special programs, again, it's in that same area. We just want to remind you, if you're Perkins funded, you need to identify that class as Carl Perkins. So the identifier is not at the course level, it's at the class level so that it could be exported into TE. So special programs include Carl Perkins, I think there's EL Civics, there are others to choose from. But if you are CTE, if you offer CTE and they're Perkins funded classes, be sure to choose that special program. And at the bottom, let me back up here. So at the bottom of these screenshots, I have a YouTube link. So that will actually help you find out where to navigate to these pages. And again, it's the same, I think that one's the same YouTube, but we have a YouTube help article on managing and looking for all the tools you need to manage TE and CASAS. Okay, and finally, just remember every single course that is going to be brought over for CAEP or WIOA needs to be identified with a single WIOA course group. So ASAP's WIOA course groups actually get converted into CAEP instructional programs when it's brought over. So even though if you're an agency that's only CAEP funded, you still have to utilize these WIOA course groups. All right, and then this is just a sample of a class export. So every export file is going to have in column A, your vendor codes coming from ASAP, your state agency code, and so on. You just need to realize you really want to get intimate with your data. You want to understand what you're bringing over, what all the headers are, what the codes mean, and just validate that everything's truly ready to be brought over to TE before you import. So again, this is just a sample of a file. The next two files are your demographics and your entries. So basically, this is when you're doing intake. All of this is coming from the registration form, from the demographics. And the entries is where you're collecting the enrollment, the goals, and then also barriers and employment status. Goals are required. So I want to point out a couple of areas in ASAP 4 where you can collect the goals. So you can collect the goals upon enrollment through the invoice, or you can do it at the class level. So over on the right here, the invoice has a little set of ellipsis signs at the upper right. If you click on that, after you've done the enrollment, you can add the primary and secondary goals from that link. Over on the left is the class detail page. So again, you're going to go to the ellipsis in the upper right, manage CASAS tops. This is the same set of options that are available in version 3. And the page you'll recognize is actually the same as version 3. The actual area where you can choose the goals. You can look at class test scores. This is where you do the updates and so on. And again, I have another YouTube link that shows you how to navigate at that point.
Hey, Cindy, there's one question that just came up. So Jamie says they have recently asked for teacher demographics. Will that be included in the section you spoke of that included years and focus area?
Right. So you're talking about personnel, the personnel file?
It sounds like that's, oh yeah, she said yes. Yep.
Right. So that's what we plan to update so that you don't have to do it separately in TE. So we're planning to add the year. I believe it's going to be based on a hire date. So there'll be a hire date, and then we'll have the credentials that are in the exchanging data table that CASAS allows you to bring over. And if any of you have any suggestions or advice on that, let us know. But I think it will be coming from, the number of years is coming from a higher date. So our system will calculate that. If you feel that should be a different approach, let us know, because I know teachers come and go. And so as far as seniority, number of years, maybe it should be identified year by year with a drop down for each of the terms that they're working. Again, definitely open to suggestions on that. Okay, any other questions, Kevin?
Nope, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right. Okay, so the again, with the entries, we have a lot of people, we get a lot of questions. I've imported all my demographics, but the goals aren't there or the barriers aren't there. Just remember that you have to grab the entries to be able to bring over goals and barriers. And then next is the attendance, and that's what you're going to be doing minimally monthly, if not weekly or every 2 weeks. You want to export import using the daily option. And again, here's an example of what the export file looks like from ASAP. It's actually identifying it in that column J as daily. Everything comes over as minutes. And so when it pops over to TE will convert it to hours and minutes. But daily is a recommendation. And here's a screenshot of from Rolling Hills, and it's just showing, again, the daily, and then CASAS converts it to the actual number of hours. Again, there are other options for bringing over your attendance. You can also bring it over cumulative or with an update. Daily is the recommended route. The main reason is so that you can be in compliance with the periods of participation. Not only is it a WIOA mandate, but CAEP is also requiring that you keep tabs of the student periods of participation. If you're bringing over daily, the more accurate, detailed record of when a student was there allows CASAS to easily identify and manage the POPs. All right, and then finally your outcomes. So those are your workforce services and the learner results. So at the end of the term, you want to make sure that your teachers are going into this Manage CASAS TOPS page. And again, to navigate to that, I have the YouTube link at the bottom here. You're going to go to the updates and identify specific workforce services received. We used to have it set up as a broad category where it was just training services. transition, supportive, and career, there was like just 4 checkboxes. Now we've broken it out. So under training, there's a whole selection of options and so on for the others. So make sure that you're identifying those. And even more important are the learner results for your payment points. You got a job, passed high set, earned a high school diploma, and so on. So those are the areas that you really want to work with your teachers to make them understand what the different choices mean, when it's appropriate or not to check those items. But again, get as much information from their students as possible. Kevin, any other coming in?
There was one question from Sandy asking if we would have a filter on the personnel import or export to only pull instructors or filter by like user type. But we
Yes, I remember. Yeah, so we were talking about that at one point. I think we need to revisit that, because I know right now it's forcing you to bring over non-instructors. So you're bringing over the office staff and so on. So we'll definitely look into that. Kevin, if you can make a note of that.
Yep.
That would be a nice way to make it easier for everybody. All right, the next file after updates are kind of around the same time. I know some schools bring over updates and student program status around the same time. Literally, all it's really doing is bringing over the instructional program start date. So that's an important file. And then finally, the last one is the student class status. Some schools do this, some not, but it's allowing you to bring over students as a completer or if they've left. So when is it done? It's done at the end of a term or when the student has left or finished. All right, so that's an overview of the data. I went through that very, very quickly. The next, I think, is even more important, to review the data before exporting. And we have some reports that are within the export file page that you can use to review the demographics before that's brought over, and also the updates. So this is, I did just kind of a quick flow chart, again, of those data files. So you have the PERS and the CLS file. That's done when the classes are set up at the beginning of a term. And then finally, student intake would be the demographics, entries, attendance, and then the outcomes. So that's just kind of the flow of things. Okay, and the 2 reports that I was mentioning are on the export TOPS report. One of them is to grab and view all the demographic information before that's brought over, and the other link is to review the update data. So from here, this is just an example. So you can easily spot check to see if there's any holes in your data. For the most part, you want to make sure that the items on your intake registration form are required. If they're not required, then the student, there's that option to not have to fill in that information. But again, with the demographics, it's everything from the number of school years in school completed, highest degree, and so on. So all of that is allows you to get a really nice quick view of this. This particular file, you can sort it by course name. So that allows you to just kind of view it by class. And if you need to hand it out to your instructors who are in charge of certain programs, they can go and try to help you fill in the blanks.
There was a question about the student program status. They were asking if you could repeat what you said about the student program status part. I think that may have been a couple of slides back.
On this one?
Yeah, I think that's
okay. Right. So from what I gather, the SPS file does include the instructional program start date. But from what I gather, TE can also use the attendance to determine that, because your attendance is tied to an instructional program. But again, this is, I don't know if it's for certain programs that maybe are managing more programs or less. I'm not quite sure. Anyway, Lydia, I'm gonna put you on the spot. If there's any words of wisdom on that, let us know. Or Sandy.
For the student program status, it's been my experience that it's actually triggered by attendance and it crosses programs.
So is it important to bring that file over, or is this one optional
Yes.
as well?
The student
Okay.
program status, it is important to bring it over.
Okay, because that identifies the program more.
It does, yes.
Okay, got it.
And then another question was, is student class data, is that pulled from the updates or the class page?
It's actually a combination of both, because it will look at the last time the student was touched in the class and on the update. So when you look at the data inside of TE on the wizard, it will have a variety of dates on there. And that could be the last time that the student was marked as, let's say, completed within the class, and then also the date of the actual update when it was completed also within the class. So it's being pulled from a variety of places.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. All right. Lydia, thank you so much. Helpful. All right. And the next check and balances is to look at your update records. So you can run this review update report. And I highlighted that checkbox for students with attendance hours only, so that you're only bringing that information over. And then down below is just kind of an overview of what you would see. So you can sort it by, again, course name, like you would for the demographic report, and just have an overview of what updates are done. That report is kind of a more, I want to say, more granular. I prefer the second one that we have, and this is under the class summary grid by time period. It's a report that's under custom queries. You're going to run it, and then you're going to scroll all the way over to the right. This is a pretty meaty report. There's several columns. And over to the right, there are the second, third to the last few columns. You're going to get the number of students with updates per class, and then also the date of the last update. So it's really helpful. Like this first row, you have 6 students that were have completed updates. So if you have 10 in the class, you know you need to go after those other 4. To me, it's a really good kind of overview of that. And then again, I just want to reiterate, it's important to identify your courses to a WIOA course group. The report you can use to check that is the all courses by organization report. Again, that's another custom query. So that allows you to easily identify in a WIOA course group, yes or no, and it'll identify any missing in WIOA. So I have a screenshot of the CAEP data integrity. So under students not enrolled in one of the 7 CAEP programs, if you have a number in there, you need to go back and check your data and just make sure that you've identified those courses with that instructional program. Or perhaps you have students that, are mismarked somehow. So, but again, that's one way to kind of check your validity with the 7 CAEP programs. All right, export settings and options. So I'm going to just go to the export tops page. You go to reporting, miscellaneous. You can bookmark that report. And here it is. So at the top of the report, you have all of your ways to kind of sort by class. So time period, course groups, status, and so on. So the usual filters that you see on most of our ASAP reports. And then on the bottom are the most important, I think, when you're doing daily attendance, just make sure that you're checking that export daily attendance checkbox. And if you have multiple time periods in a school year, a lot of schools are using that export extended class ID option. And what that allows you to do, if you're using the same class numbers for each term, like you have an ESL class and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so that's your fall time period. And then you have your winter time period, it's the same ESL class and it's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you're using the same class codes, how are you going to identify one from the other? So bringing over the extended class ID will allow the system to identify it with your fall or winter time period or whatever time periods that you have set up within a fiscal year. And then some other options in the middle of the screen here. You can always choose just to bring over students with attendance hours. I know a lot of people use that. And then also to include your Social Security number in the demographics export. So I know that's an important identifier for the community colleges. And by default, we don't bring over any of the concurrently enrolled high school students. If for some reason you want to utilize that and just view it as a report, you can, but we included it in there because we do have some schools that just like to do a check and balance of their data to make sure the high school students are marked correctly. They don't bring them over to TE, but they just want to validate. And then once you've done all your choosing of your filters, you're going to select all or select individually. And then finally, I wanted to remind you that the course groups are customizable. On the left, the WIOA default ones, those are the ones that you're required to use because that's how we identify the instructional programs when you're exporting your CLS, your SPS, and so on. So those you would use to, again, identify your data sets, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to use these. Okay, we have a lot of newer users. I want to say when they're going through this filtering of their classes, they use the WIO ESL. So they bring over all of their ESL classes, and they're doing that, but they really wanted to bring over the ESL with the high school diploma. It's forcing them to do a double the work. So over on the right, I have an example of there's one, I'm calling it ESL _ HSD _ HSC. So you can configure your course groups to include multiple courses and multiple course groups so that you don't have to do the ESL and then separately do the high school diploma. You can merge them into this course group so that you can grab everything at one time. Or you can even do that for the certain programs and change it for others. So, it's really to your discretion how you want to sort everything out. Or maybe you want to be even more specific and not bring over all of the ESL classes. Maybe you just want to bring over ESL Advanced. So you can be as specific, merge all your programs together, You can use the WIOA course groups, but again, make it your, design it for yourself so that as you're downloading your data, that you're making it simple for yourself, because you're bringing over attendance, multiple times during the year, you're doing the updates. So you just want to, if there's any way you can use course groups to streamline those exports, take advantage of that.
There's one question about saving TOPS goals. So you can either save them at the, I guess, like the class level when you do the managed classes TOPS, but then you can also do it at the invoice level. Depending on which one, does it get saved in the same place, or how does that work?
So it gets, yes, it gets saved to the same place. That's correct. Because it ends up on, I don't have a sample of a ENT file, but it is part of the entry record. It all goes to the same, because it's the same. It's actually the choices are identical. So you have the primary and secondary. So you're right, it ends up at the same. What you don't want to do is to collect it in the reg form, because if you're collecting it on the registration form, it's not going to automatically be exported over. If you're collecting it on the reg form, you're going to need to go into the class and record all of the goals.
Thank you.
All right, some best practices. So this is just an overview of the frequency. And again, this is just a nice resource to have, just to remind you of kind of the whole cadence of things. So the first two files of beginning of the year, personnel classes, demographics and entries at your intake, attendance minimally monthly. And then finally, when a term ends or the students are moving on, the updates and student program status. Okay, another best practice is to make sure that you're recording each time that you're transferring your data back and forth between the two programs, just to keep a log. Keep a log, or if you just prefer to keep all of your files in one place, and you're, normally when you're bringing your files over, they're all dated anyway. It'll show the last date modified. So whatever way that you can remember what you did back in July when the school year started, to go back and just remember what course groups you brought over, when you did it. Did you bring over the waitlisted students as well, or did you bring over the drops, or those types of things? You can just really be as detailed so that again, you need to be accountable for what you did in the beginning of the school year, first quarter versus second, and so on, so that you remember where you last left off. And then here's a sample of what you might want to include. So, maybe like the process date. So this is everything I did in the beginning of the year in July. And then the class IDs, when did I bring it over? What was the name of the file? Check off what was done, what was not done, and so on. So, just try to, again, you need to have your own workflow, whatever you're more comfortable with, but a log sheet is a great idea. Or just managing your files with folders and such, so that you remember, again, what did I do 2 months ago? All right, and some ASAP reports that are really handy to kind of cross-reference with the CAEP DIR and the CAEP summary. One of them is our class enrollments with total hours in homeschool. So I'm going to pop over to this. So here's the CAEP DIR. And under 2, 2A, and 2B, you have less than 12 hours of instruction, 0, and so on. So you have the counts on the DIR, but you can also run this report before you bring the data over, so that you can just kind of, either clean those up or just kind of have an idea of what those counts are, so that after you import everything over, everything should match. But just a really good idea to run the DIRs and the summaries throughout the year. Don't wait to the end of the year for any surprises. You want to clean up as you can. A lot of people are running the DIR, once a month or even weekly. So it's just really good to have a handle on your data. You want to, again, you really want to be intimate with your data. Another handy report, the attendance summary by student in a course group. So this allows you to determine post-test eligibility. Okay, the reason why I'm bringing that up. So you run your CAEP summary and your enrollees with pre and post tests. Let's say those numbers are really low. So you need to catch up and try to, get more markers in there for post testing. Utilize this report to be proactive and keep track of the total number of hours that your students have accrued to know, when they're ready to post test. So you can take advantage of that. Again, this one is under custom queries, attendance summary by student in course group. And another report that's handy for determining post-testing eligibility is a new report that we added, attendance and last tests by student. So this report is dependent on the fact that you're importing CASAS test scores into ASAP. So not only do we give you the number of hours since the last test date, we identify the last CASAS test date. And again, what do we have here? Sergey had added the days after the last CASAS tests, and then the class hours by the last test date. So again, both of these are really helpful when you want to be proactive to get those numbers up, enrollees with pre and post tests. All right, and then just a quick overview. So we talked about, exporting the data from TE and bringing it over, or from ASAP and bringing it over to TE. The other option for you to do, we have a lot of agencies that take advantage of it, is to bring your CASAS test scores over to ASAP. And so, again, I'm not going to go through all the steps here because this is more letting you know where to find those instructions, but we have a link to the import page here at the top. This is where to do the export from TE. And then when you're ready to import, this is the import wizard. So what I really want to focus on is, where does that information land? So in ASAP 4, you're going to go to a student detail page. You're going to go to the header of education records. That's normally where you go for transcripts, but we have a separate area for test scores. And then now we have a dedicated area for CASAS test scores. So in ASAP Classic, you had to go to a separate dropdown for CASAS test scores. So they've dedicated a special area within that test score tab. So that's really handy. And then for a class, if you want to view the test scores for an entire class or just by a student, you can go to this Manage CASAS Tops page again. So if you hit class test score, you're going to see all the test scores. So you can just validate, placement for your students. Kevin, any questions coming in that I?
Oh yeah, so there's some questions about what happens if you have a single invoice with more than one class in it, and you save the top schools for that invoice. And I did do a test earlier for just one class on one invoice, and I saved the top schools at the invoice level, and it does automatically transfer over to that class, but I haven't done it with multiple classes before. I'm not sure if you've tested that.
Okay, no, that's a good idea. We need to look at that.
Yeah.
Because especially if the classes are in different programs, like if they're signing up for 2 ESL classes, the goals you would think would be the same. But if they're enrolling in maybe ESL and a high set class, you're going to have 2 different sets of goals.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you
Right.
can look at that, that's a good idea.
Yep.
But I think that's uncommon for a student to register for 2 programs at the same time. I don't know. It's a good question. Okay, and then finally, these are just our resources. So the exchanging data is important to have that handy. There's a new one that just came out for October, and what they've added is the I'm trying to remember what it's called, the personal status for a student. I think it's under personal status. They've added refugee. So if you have if you've been collecting refugee all along under your customer groups, that will go under this this special personal status. But if you're curious about that, email me, because I'm trying to remember where that lands, because I don't think it's part of the barriers. It's in a separate section. Again, if you have refugee in your customer groups drop down, it'll utilize that. If you don't, we do plan to add it to everybody's system. So you have that option, when you're bringing everything over. But again, refugee was added recently. So that's one of the newer ones. And then these are our ASAP resources. And of course, there's support and our phone. And if there's any specific questions, that you might have for Kevin or myself, definitely email support and just copy us, or say, I really need to talk to Kevin about this or that, or Cindy, or, just, you can definitely have them reach out to us. And I think that's it. Kevin, any more questions? I think I'm actually have time. I may go into ASAP here and do a little bit of a demo here. Why don't I?
There were some people that were saying that one of them said they do have lots of ESL students in Spanish GED, so I guess like across programs or something like that.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that they would. Yeah, we have to. Let's test that and check that out. That's a great question. Okay, so I wanted to kind of show you within the system. We'll go to, so here's a advanced ESL class. And so if you go to details, so, by default, you're going to see the roster. Let me expand this a little. And then this is where we have the CASAS tab. So under here, and then you're going to click the pencil icon. So this is where you have these options. And again, we're going to be adding HighFlex to this dropdown. And then if you click into the special programs area, this is where you can select those options. So you do have to scroll down a bit to get to the Carl Perkins. But I know a lot of these are important to bring over to TE. I know the EL Civics, not sure about some of these others, but typically we have users looking for the EL Civics identifier, and we're trying to let everybody know to use Carl Perkins if they're funded. And then once you make your selection, just hit the little save icon here.
And then there's a question, does the personnel export to TOPS pull from the teachers we have teaching classes for this school year. I think that's based off of like the time period and the fiscal year filter. So depending on what you have there, it's going to pull from that.
Yeah,
period.
and not only that, yeah, as as Sandy had mentioned earlier, it brings over everybody, not even just the teachers. So that's what we need to filter out. Okay, and then the other thing to look for in the upper right corner here, when you're in a class, this is where you can get to that CASAS page, manage CASAS tops. And then this is where you can collect the goals. So again, you're doing it by class. And you can view all test scores. I may have scores from previous. So this is what it would look like for a class view of the test scores or individually. Not sure if I have any under here, but you'll be able to view the test scores from there. And then finally the update. And again, these are the two sets of for the workforce services received that we've expanded out, and the learner results. So all of that is here. And then let me go into I don't know where those are done. If you're collecting goals on the invoice, let's make sure that this is yeah, I don't think my community ed allows that. Actually, let me go back here. So what I'm trying to do is pull up an invoice for like an ESL class. Okay, so here's my student class. So I can go to this paid link, bring up the invoice, and then it's the ellipsis at the top, and this is where you add the TOPS goals. So it's right here. And then we just have the drop-down menus like that. So primary and secondary. So again, that's done just singularly, by student as they're entering. A lot of people prefer to do it at the class level, so you can do it in bulk.
And I was able to test what happens if you have an invoice with multiple classes for the same student. If you go into add top schools at the invoice page, it does show that student multiple times for each class that's on that invoice.
Oh, good. Okay.
I'll try to upload a screenshot of that on the chat.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to think if I have one. I usually only register for one, but okay, that's great. So it sounds like when you go here, you're going to have this row is advanced ESO, so you're going to have another row for the other class. Okay, I hope that answers the question that came up.
There was another question. Is there a report for missing goals from classes or students? Is that the student program status export they would have to look at?
No, the goals all are in the entry.
Oh, someone also mentioned the DIR in TE.
Okay, yeah. So you're you can definitely check on the let me see if I have the screenshot of that. Here. So the date, yeah, that would make sense. So the data integrity will really list out any missing goals. And then you can drill down from that. Okay, any other questions?
The slides and this recording is going to be on the the website for the CAEP website, right? I think that was
Right,
what
but
you're saying.
but Kevin, if you don't mind uploading it to the chat one more time, because
Oh, sure.
I
Yep.
actually made changes since, I mean, minor changes, but the slide deck on the CAEP Summit website will be a little bit different.
Okay, sounds good. I'll drop it in the chat right
Okay.
now.
So I'm going to mention, I just want to take advantage of this opportunity. We've added a way, if any of you have a historical archive database where we brought over your ASAP 2 data to version 3, because I think some of you on the call have that. We just released, and Kevin's going to create like a video how to make this happen. You can now export a transcript from your historical and import it into your current. So I know we had a lot of schools asking for that capability. So if you have, again, that historical data that was brought over, whether it was from AIM or ASAP 2, you can now bring those records over and import them into your current database. So you don't have to manually enter that data. I hope that makes sense for some of you, what I just said, because I think, yeah, there are, I think, a handful of you that have that. And if you have an IT department that's managing the old version 2, and they want to retire the servers, you know, we have a lot of schools kind of going that direction. We do have that service where we bring that data into a completely separate account. So you would have your adults, like this is my demo site for 147. I would have a separate one for ASA Adult Ed Historical Archive. So you would have a completely separate database that only a few people have access to retrieve transcript records, attendance hours. So again, we've created a tool. When you go to the import page, let me see if I can, so I have that. So we created another way to import transcripts back and forth between your historical archive and the current. So if you're interested in that sooner than later, let me know. But we do plan to get the word out and also some instructions to kind of go along with that. Right, any other questions? And again, I hope I didn't go through the slides too quickly. I thought it would take a little more time. Kevin,
So
is
we had
there?
a
Yeah.
few questions about, like people are saying, some of them are saying they have a separate account for ASAP historical, but it didn't bring over class records or attendance hours. So if you guys are talking about like a version, well, the current version ASAP 4 or version 3, we do have some new accounts we created for some adult schools where we brought over all the version 2 historical data into basically version 3 and 4. So if we did not do that for you, then you would end up having to go back to version 2 to see those historical records. If we did do this transfer over for you, we brought over pretty much all the class records, but attendance hours, I believe we mostly just bring over what the first date of attendance is and last date of attendance.
Yeah, and it's cumulative, so it's not going to show the daily, but as Kevin's saying, we identify the first and last date of attendance for that class. Okay, any questions outside of even the TOPS data? If there's anything in ASAP 4 you have questions on, or, and we are working on the speed of having the class page buffer a lot quicker. So there's a lot of performance issues that we're going to be cleaning up. And then in January, we're hoping to have a lot more releases coming out for different updates that people have been waiting for. All right.
All right. While people are thinking of maybe more questions or comments for you, Cindy, can I jump in?
Sure.
All right. I just wanted to let everybody know I have just posted the session evaluation in the chat. I think this is a really great session. So if everyone could fill out the evaluation, I believe that the videos, this video could be posted on the website after they review evaluations. So there's that. So once again, the link to the evaluation is in the chat, and I'm going to go ahead. I wanted to put that in there before people started dropping out of the session. So
Okay.
I'll turn it
great.
back over to you, Cindy.
All right. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And again, yeah, don't hesitate to get a hold of us. You know, if there's anything that you have as suggestions to, you know, make the data transfer easier. And again, I'd love to hear any feedback on bringing more information for the teacher, the personnel file from ASAP to TE. We welcome any suggestions. Kevin, is there anything you wanted to chime in on?
Nope, I think that was
That's
everything.
new, new and improved. And we are going to be ramping up our monthly webinars again. So there'll be information on that coming soon. I think we're starting. Kevin, is there going to be one in November? I think.
Yes, there should be one in November.
Yeah, there'll be one starting in November. So hope to see you there. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Don't forget to fill out the evaluation. I can paste it again in the chat for you. And have a great rest of your day. The next session is scheduled to start in about half an hour, so you've got time to grab yourself some water or refill your coffee. So 2:30. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.
Marjorie, thank you for all your help.
Oh yeah, no problem. Let me stop the recording here.